In this lesson, we are going to now start talking about operations with integers. And the first operation we're going to talk about is addition. So how do we add integers together, specifically with positives and negatives and things like that? How does that work when we add these values together? So our first essential question is, how do you add integers? And secondly, what does adding integers look like modeled on a number line? Sometimes it's easier to conceptualize addition of integers if you can see it in action, if you can kind of see this playing out on a number line. So that's what we're going to look at, modeling addition on the number line. So I took a basic example here, 3 plus 4. Well, hopefully we all know that 3 plus 4 is 7, but what does 3 plus 4 look like on a number line? So here I showed on the number line that we start at 0, and then we start with 3, so we move 3 in the positive direction, so positive 3 plus positive 4, so we're going to move another 4 in the positive direction, and then that gives us 7. So 3 plus 4 is 7, duh. And that's what it looks like on the number line. Now, what you may not have seen before is adding negative numbers together. What does that look like? Well, now I'm going to do the same thing, but now it's negative 3 plus negative 4. So again, I start at 0, and I'm going to move 3 in the negative direction. That puts me at negative 3. And then I'm going to add more negative to it. So I'm going to move 4 more in the negative direction. And that puts me at an ending point of negative 7. So negative 3 plus negative 4 is negative 7. So you can kind of see that when I'm adding negatives together, I just kind of keep moving left on the number line. And when I'm adding positives together, I keep moving right on the number line. So we call this adding numbers with the same sign. That means adding positives together or adding negatives together. So when you add integers with the same sign together, you combine their values. Now this is critical. This would be absolutely something that I would put in my notes. Adding integers with the same sign combines their values. So if the integers have the same sign, that means they're both positive or they're both negative, we're just going to combine those values together because they're both moving in the same direction on the number line. So I've got a few examples here to show that. So again, negative 3 plus negative 4. So if I'm moving 3 in the negative direction and then adding another 4 in the negative direction, those values actually combine and help each other, and they move a total of 7 in the negative direction. Next one, negative 6 plus negative 14. These both have the same sign. They're both negative, so they're both moving in the negative direction on the number line. So I move 6 left on the number line, and then I move another 14 left on the number line. So I add more negative to that. That moves me to the left even further on the number line. That's going to put me at negative 20 on the number line because I combined those values together. 6 negatives plus 14 negatives is a total of 20 negatives. And then the last example, negative 7 plus negative 2. Again, I've got 7 negatives, so I'm moving 7 in the negative direction, and then I'm moving 2 more in the negative direction. That will put me at negative 9, or I've combined those values together. So 7 negatives plus 2 negatives gives me a total of 9 negatives. Now, I didn't do any positives plus positives examples here because you've been doing those for quite a few years. I really want you to focus on getting those operations with negative numbers down. So we're going to do a few more problems here, and we're going to model them on the number line, because that's one of our goals, is to be able to show this on the number line. So again, I'm stuck with a pretty basic example here of 5 plus 3. So if I start at 0 and I move 5 in the positive direction, so that gives me my 5. And then I'm adding 3 more positive to that. So I'm moving in the positive direction 3 more. And that puts me at an endpoint of 8. So that's modeling 5 plus 3 on the number line. So 5 plus 3 is 8. Duh. Now the next ones, we got negative numbers involved, so let's try to keep it just as simple as we did with the positives. So if I start at 0 and I move 1 in the negative direction, that's negative 1, and then I'm going to add 6 more negatives to that. So I'm going to move 6 more in the negative direction. That's 6 spaces to the left. And that's going to put me at an endpoint of negative 7. So negative 1 plus negative 6 is negative 7. So again, combining the values together, 1 negative plus 6 negatives is 7 negatives. And then lastly, again, negative 2 plus negative 8. If I start at 0 and I move 2 in the negative direction, and then I'm going to move 8 more in the negative direction, that's going to put me at an endpoint of negative 10. So I've combined these negative values together to get a total of negative 10. So negative 2 plus negative 8 is negative 10. So adding numbers with the same sign is actually quite easy because it's just addition. You're just combining the values together. Now, the trouble comes when we try to add numbers that don't have the same sign. So what if I add a positive number and a negative number together? What does that look like on the number line? So let's take a look here at 7 plus negative 9. So if I model this on the number line, you can see that I start at 0 and I move 7 in the positive direction. But now I'm adding a negative number to it, so I'm not moving in the positive direction anymore. Now I'm going to turn around and move in the negative direction 9 spaces. So from here, from 7, I'm moving 9 places backwards because now I'm kind of canceling out the progress that I've made. So I'm moving to the left now 9 spaces. So if I start at 0 and move 7 positive and then 9 in the negative direction, where am I going to end up? I'm going to end up at negative 2. So 7 plus negative 9 is actually negative 2. Okay, so these values do not combine together. So I'm not going to get 16 or negative 16 or anything like that. It's actually going to be a cancellation. So let's look at another example, negative 6 plus 5. So if, again, I start at 0 and I move negative 6, so I move 6 spaces to the left, but now I'm going to add a positive to it, which is going to turn me around and move me in the positive direction 5 spaces. So if I move 6 spaces to the left in the negative direction and then add 5 positives to that and move 5 spaces in the positive direction, where am I going to end up? You end up at negative 1. So negative 6 plus 5 is negative 1. So again, these values are canceling each other out. They're not combining because they're moving against each other. They're moving in opposite directions. Positives and negatives move in opposite directions. So they're actually going to be canceling each other out. And it's whichever one has the greater absolute value, that's how your answer is going to turn out, whether positive or negative. So how do we add numbers that have different signs? Again, this would be something critical to add to your notes. Adding integers with different signs cancels their values. It doesn't combine them. So adding numbers with the same sign combines. Adding numbers with different signs cancels. So they're going to be canceling each other out because they're working in opposite directions because they have opposite signs. So let's take a look at some examples down here below. I have negative 3 plus 6. So you can kind of visualize this on your number line if you do that in your mind. If you move 3 spaces in the negative direction from 0 and then move a positive 6 to the right, where are you going to end up? Well, these values cancel each other out. So 3 of those negatives are going to get canceled out. And then I'm going to have 3 positives left over. So that puts me at positive 3. Negative 3 plus 6 is a positive 3. Next one, 5 plus negative 2. So if I move 5 places to the right, I'm at 5. And then I turn around and move 2 places backwards. That's going to put me at positive 3. So 5 plus negative 2 is positive 3. And then last one here, 4 plus negative 8. So if I move 4 in the positive direction and then I turn around and move 8 to the left, well, that's going to put me on the other side of 0 because I've canceled 4 away and then I've got 4 more spaces to go that total of negative 8. That's going to put me at negative 4 on our number line. And so 4 plus negative 8 is negative 4. So let's again model this on the number line so we can kind of conceptualize this a little bit better. Negative 5 plus 3. So again, I'm starting at 0 and I'm going to move 5 in the negative direction. This is negative 5. And from there, I'm going to turn around and move 3 spaces back to the right. That's going to put me at negative 2. Negative 5 plus 3 is negative 2. That's what that looks like on the number line. Next one, 6 plus negative 1. So I'm going to start again at 0 and move 6 in the positive direction. And then I'm going to cancel one of those positives out because I'm moving 1 space back, or 1 in the negative direction, and that puts me at positive 5. So 6 plus negative 1 is 5. That's kind of like just 6 minus 1. And then the last one, 7 plus -8. Again, I'm going to start in the positive direction. I'm going to move 7 places to the right in the positive direction, and then I'm going to turn around and I'm going to move 8 places to the left. So all 7 positives get canceled out, and then I've got one more place to go to get -8, and that puts me at -1. 7 plus -8 is -1. So adding numbers with different signs actually has a canceling effect. It's almost like subtraction, really. So what happens when we have opposites that we're adding together? We call these additive inverses, and that's two numbers whose sum is 0. Now these will be opposites. Now you'll move in the same amount to the right as you would to the left, or the same amount to the left as you would to the right. So this is called the additive inverse property. When you add opposites together, you always get 0. So I've got an example of that here below. 5 plus -5 is 0. Because if you move 5 units to the right in the positive direction, and then if you turn around and just do 5 units to the left in the negative direction, you're going to end up right back where you started at 0. So that happens every time you add opposites together, and that's called the additive inverse property. Whenever you add opposites, you always get 0. What happens if you're adding more than two integers together? So since numbers can be added in any order, sometimes it's easier to add numbers that have the same sign first, because adding numbers with the same sign is easier. This is a combining, not a canceling. So if you have numbers that have the same sign, both positive or both negative, it might be a good tip to add those numbers together first, because that's easier, and then do the canceling with the numbers that have different signs. Another tip would be to look for additive inverses. Look for opposites that will just combine to get 0. That will make your life a lot easier when you're adding numbers together. So do a little bit of problem solving first before you go and add, and don't just automatically add numbers from left to right, because sometimes that's a little more burdensome or a little more difficult to do. So let's look at these examples. We have 4 plus -2 plus -7. So I see that I have two numbers here that have the same sign. These are both negative, so I'm going to actually add those first, and I'm going to combine those values together. So I have 4 plus -2 plus -7 is going to be -9. So I've combined those negatives together. So now I just have a problem that has a positive number and a negative number. These are going to cancel each other out, and that's going to give me a -5. So that was a little bit easier to do than having to do from left to right a canceling and then another canceling. The next one here, -6 plus -15 plus 6, I might be tempted to combine the two negatives together, but if you look a little bit closer, you'll notice that -6 and +6 are opposites. Okay, these are what we call additive inverses. So if I add these together first, what's going to happen? I'm going to get 0. Okay, so these give me 0. So I have 0 plus -15, which makes my life really easy, because 0 plus anything doesn't change the number. And I have -15. So finding those opposites will be easier to add as well. And then the last one, -8 plus 4 plus -1 plus 6. Here I've got several types of numbers, positives and negatives. So I'm going to go with that first tip, and I'm going to add my negative numbers together. And -8 plus -1, these combine to give me -9. And then my positive numbers, 4 plus 6 is 10. So I have -9 plus 10, and then these are going to cancel. So 9 negatives are going to cancel out 9 of those positives. I'm going to have 1 positive left. I'm going to end up at +1 here in the end. So adding integers together, if they have the same sign, they're going to combine. If they are different signs, they are going to cancel. And then if you need a number line to model those, you are free to do so.